It was a quiet night in Atlanta. The streets were mostly empty, the hum of distant traffic the only sound beneath a sky dotted with faint stars. Inside a modest brick home, laughter had filled the air just hours before. A moment that should have been immortalized in joy, a moment captured live for the world to see, was about to become a memory drowned in tragedy. The Facebook live stream had shown her smiling, her eyes bright, her hand trembling with excitement as he dropped to one knee. Yes, she had said, her voice echoing over the digital airwaves, a single word that should have bound them together forever. Friends and strangers alike had reacted with hearts and emojis, celebrating the promise of love. 3 days later, the joy vanished. A 911 call pierced the silence. A frantic, panicked voice, screaming for help, breaking the night as though the stars themselves were shattering. When authorities arrived, the scene was something out of a nightmare. The house was eerily still. The smell of gunpowder lingered. A single bullet casing lay near the doorway. There were no signs of struggle. No forced entry. Only a lifeless body, her laughter and light extinguished. And yet, this was not a robbery. This was something far more personal. Something that should have never been allowed to reach this point. The crime was beyond brutality, yet its origins were invisible, hidden behind smiles, social media posts, and the mask of affection. Who could do this? How could someone so close, someone who shared promises of forever, turn the night of a proposal into a house of horror? And why did it happen so fast, so unexpectedly, leaving a family, friends, and a community in stunned silence? Tonight, we will tell the story. The story of love, obsession, betrayal, and murder. The story that began with a simple yes and ended with irreversible tragedy. Every detail matters. Every memory, every message, every action leads us closer to understanding how a life full of promise could be cut short in the blink of an eye. And as we unfold this story, you will feel the weight of heartbreak, the tension of fear, and the unbearable sorrow of lives forever changed. 3 days. One proposal. One choice. One life lost. The question remains, could anyone have stopped it? Tahlia Morgan was 28, a rising star in her community. Her laugh was contagious, her kindness endless, and her spirit unbreakable. Growing up in a bustling Atlanta neighborhood, she learned early how to fight for her dreams. She worked at a local art studio, teaching children to express themselves through paint and color, yet she always found time for her friends and family. Her mother, Yvette, often said Tahlia had a heart too big for the world, and maybe that was true. She trusted too easily, gave too freely, and loved with everything she had. Darnell Hayes was 30, a man whose charisma drew people in effortlessly. He owned a small tech startup, charming in meetings and magnetic in social settings. Friends described him as intelligent, ambitious, and thoughtful, yet there was a part of him few truly saw. Beneath the smiles and the confidence, a shadow of insecurity lingered, subtle but constant. He craved recognition, admiration, and control, even in the smallest details of his relationships. Tahlia and Darnell met at a community art fundraiser 2 years prior. She had been teaching a workshop, he had volunteered to help set up. Their connection was immediate, electric. They shared late-night conversations about dreams, childhood memories, and fears they had never voiced to anyone else. For months, it seemed the universe had conspired to bring them together. They were inseparable, often photographed laughing together at local events, their happiness shared freely across social media. Family and friends saw them as a perfect couple, but underneath the laughter and the public smiles, tension had begun to build. Tahlia noticed subtle changes, Darnell's sudden absences, the way he guarded his phone, the fleeting anger that would pass as quickly as it arrived. She questioned herself, wondered if she was imagining things, until little moments accumulated into a troubling pattern. Yvette, Tahlia's mother, noticed too. "He's not treating her like she deserves," she said one night over tea. "But Tahlia, she loves him. She can't see it yet." That maternal intuition, the kind that often senses danger before it arrives, would later haunt Yvette as she replayed memories, searching for clues that might have prevented the tragedy. Darnell, meanwhile, was under pressure of his own. His business was struggling, a recent failed contract leaving him frustrated and desperate. He projected this stress onto his personal life, his charm slipping at times, replaced by sharp words and fleeting impatience. No one, not even Tahlia, could have predicted the intensity of what was coming next. The proposal was meant to be a new chapter, a celebration of love conquering doubt. Tahlia's yes was the moment of triumph they had both been waiting for. And yet, just 3 days later, that triumph became a prelude to horror. The story that began with laughter, love, and hope was about to unravel in a way that would leave everyone questioning what they truly knew about the people closest to them. The innocence of a promise shattered, replaced by fear, betrayal, and grief that would linger far longer than anyone could imagine. The days after the proposal should have been filled with joy. Friends and family expected laughter, phone calls, and shared excitement. Instead, a quiet tension began to creep into Tahlia's life, subtle at first, barely noticeable. Darnell's smiles seemed forced. The warmth in his eyes flickered, replaced by moments of silence that stretched too long. Tahlia, ever trusting, brushed it off. She told herself he was just stressed. He had been working late nights, juggling the demands of his startup, trying to make a name for himself. But the small things, the missed dinner plans, the way his hand trembled when he held hers, the nervous tapping of his fingers, began to plant seeds of unease in her mind. Her friends, especially Jasmine, her closest confidant, noticed the change too. "Tahlia, something isn't right," Jasmine had said softly, gripping her friend's hand. "You deserve to be happy, fully happy, not just in moments. Watch him. Please, just watch him." But Tahlia, with her heart full of hope and love, insisted everything was fine. She wanted to believe in the man she loved, in the life they were building together. Meanwhile, Darnell wrestled with emotions he couldn't express. Anger, disappointment, fear of failure, and a desperate need to control the narrative of his life simmered beneath the surface. He was careful, hiding these feelings behind carefully crafted words, laughter that masked his tension, and gestures meant to reassure. No one saw the storm building inside him, the darkness he kept locked away, even from himself. The neighborhood went on as usual. Children played under the fading sunlight, neighbors waved at passing cars, unaware of the impending tragedy. But in Tahlia's home, shadows lingered in corners, the atmosphere thick with unspoken unease. She noticed it, the chill in the air, the strange quiet when she entered the room, the way Darnell's eyes darted at unexpected sounds. Each moment should have been a warning, each heartbeat a signal that something was amiss. Then came the messages. Odd, cryptic texts that appeared harmless but carried a weight that made Tahlia pause. "Can we talk later?" one read. Another, "Don't tell anyone yet." She felt a flutter of apprehension, a gnawing fear she couldn't name. Her friends urged caution, but the world of love she had imagined blinded her. She wanted to trust, to believe in the life they had promised each other. On the night before the tragedy, the air felt heavy, charged with tension. A small argument erupted over something insignificant, but in it, all the suppressed emotions poured out. Darnell's voice, usually calm, was sharp, clipped. Tahlia's laughter, usually melodic and bright, wavered. The night stretched long, filled with small silences that spoke louder than words, a quiet that would echo tragically in the hours to come. No one could have predicted the suddenness, the shocking speed with which their world would change. One day, love and hope, the next, grief and terror. The very fabric of trust, woven carefully over months, would be ripped apart in an instant. And yet, there were signs. Small, almost invisible threads of foreshadowing, hints of what was to come. Each glance, each missed step, each fleeting hesitation pointed to an unraveling that no one dared to see. Tahlia's yes was still fresh, a shining promise. But by the next morning, that promise had begun to crumble, leaving only dread in its place. 3 days. 3 days of quiet, simmering tension. 3 days that turned a moment of love into the prelude of a nightmare. The morning light slipped quietly through the blinds, thin streams of warmth across the kitchen floor. Tahlia moved with a calm routine, her fingers brushing the coffee mug as if nothing unusual was about to happen. She hummed softly, unaware that this would be the last ordinary moment of her life. Darnell appeared in the doorway, his presence familiar and almost comforting. She smiled at him, unaware that the trust she had given so freely would soon shatter into pieces that could never be pieced together. For a brief heartbeat, everything seemed normal. Then her eyes caught something, a subtle tension in him, a coldness in the way he looked at her. She hesitated. Something in her chest tightened. Time slowed. Every heartbeat was deafening. Tahlia opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck. The air between them vibrated with something unnameable. And then it happened, a sharp, deafening gunshot. Pain tore through Talia's body, stealing her breath. Her arms flailed, desperate for something solid, anything that could anchor her to reality. Shock and disbelief overwhelmed her. No, this can't be real, she thought, but the truth of the moment crashed down relentlessly. Darnell froze, the gun trembling in his hand. Talia's eyes met his, wide and terrified, reflecting the horror that had just become undeniable. The life they had shared, the laughter, the dreams, vanished in a single, violent instant. Neighbors later recalled hearing a scream, a sound so raw and piercing it seemed impossible. Someone dialed 911, their voice shaking as they described the unimaginable. When police arrived, they found a scene more harrowing than words could capture. Tahlia lay on the kitchen floor, a life extinguished, the innocence and warmth that had filled her moments ago replaced by silence and absence. Yvette, Talia's mother, would never forget that day. Every hug, every laugh with her daughter replayed endlessly in her mind, each memory now a dagger in her heart. Friends and family clung desperately to fragments of Talia's warmth, trying to understand a cruelty that defied reason. The house that had once been full of life became a mausoleum of grief. The air, once light and comforting, hung heavy with loss and disbelief. The memory of that morning lingers, unshakable. It is a story of trust shattered, love transformed into terror, and life stolen in a heartbeat, leaving only grief and unanswerable questions. Even after the sirens faded and the neighborhood returned to its quiet rhythm, the echo of that crime remained. Every shadow, every creak of a floorboard, reminded those who loved her that the horror of that day was not a dream but a devastating reality. The neighborhood was quiet again, but the silence felt wrong, unnatural, suffocating. Sirens faded, but their echo lingered in the hearts of everyone who had heard them. Inside the house, Talia's life had ended, yet her presence hung like a shadow over every corner, every object she had touched, every photograph that captured a fleeting moment of joy. Detectives arrived, their faces calm, professional, but behind their eyes lay the gravity of what they were stepping into. Officer Malik Johnson, a seasoned investigator who had seen countless tragedies, paused at the doorway. His stomach tightened at the scene before him. There was no forced entry, no signs of struggle beyond the horrific act itself. The brutality of the crime was stark, chilling. Forensic teams moved silently, methodical, cataloging every detail. Fingerprints, shell casings, traces of DNA. Each item told a story, whispered secrets about what had happened in the last moments of Talia's life. Every photograph, every piece of furniture became evidence, a testimony to the horror that had unfolded. Family and friends were ushered outside, their faces etched with disbelief. Yvette, Talia's mother, clutched her chest, tears streaming freely, unable to comprehend the sudden absence of the daughter she had nurtured and protected. Why? How could this happen? She whispered repeatedly, her voice breaking. Each question was met with silence, the kind of silence that swallows you whole. Detective Johnson reviewed the early clues. He noted Darnell's history, the subtle warning signs that now, tragically, seemed clear in hindsight. His background check revealed a complicated past, moments of instability masked by charm and confidence. Friends described him as charismatic, loving, and devoted. Neighbors remembered him as polite, unassuming, someone you could never imagine capable of this act. The dissonance between perception and reality struck everyone like a physical blow. Investigators interviewed neighbors, friends, co-workers. Each account added layers to the puzzle. Accounts of late-night arguments, cryptic social media posts, small incidents that seemed insignificant at the time but now hinted at a deeper unrest. Tahlia's social media became a focal point. Her last posts, innocent glimpses into her life, were now haunting echoes of what had been. Evidence from the scene was analyzed meticulously. Ballistics reports, the trajectory of the bullet, the angle of the shot, all painted a harrowing picture of the final moments. It was methodical, precise, and terrifyingly intimate. The detectives reconstructed the sequence of events, piecing together the narrative that would later become central to the courtroom drama. But it wasn't just the physical evidence that carried weight. The emotional residue of the crime, the grief, the shock, the betrayal, was palpable. Friends cried in disbelief, family members questioned every decision, every interaction. How could someone she loved become the source of her death? The moral complexity gnawed at everyone involved, making the investigation not just a search for facts, but a confrontation with human darkness and vulnerability. Even as leads emerged and suspects were identified, the memory of Tahlia's life, so full of promise, lingered. The community struggled to reconcile the horror of her death with the joy she had brought to their lives. Each day of the investigation, each revelation, only deepened the emotional resonance, the sense of loss, and the urgent need for justice. And while the detectives pursued the facts, the audience, those who would watch this story unfold, felt the tension in every moment, the uncertainty, the fear, the grief. The investigation became more than a procedural exercise. It became a journey into the fragile, unpredictable intersection of love, trust, and human cruelty. As the investigation deepened, the calm surface of Tahlia and Darnell's lives began to crack, revealing fractures no one had suspected. Detective Malik Johnson pored over texts, emails, and social media messages. Every digital trace became a confession of hidden tensions, a roadmap of emotions that had been bottled up until that fatal moment. Tahlia's friends described her as radiant, kind, always generous with her laughter and her heart. Yet the investigators discovered subtle hints of unease in her final days, a lingering worry in her messages, a hesitation in her tone when speaking about Darnell. They were minor things, easy to dismiss at the time, but now they cast long, haunting shadows. Then came the shocking revelation: Darnell had been seeing someone else. It wasn't a fleeting affair, it was calculated, secretive, deliberate. For some, the betrayal alone would have been devastating. For Tahlia, it was a life-ending rupture. Friends and family tried to comprehend it. How could someone she trusted, someone she had opened her soul to, betray her so completely? Detectives uncovered a trail of planning and premeditation. Every detail of Darnell's interactions in the days leading to the crime pointed to a chilling inevitability. Texts, online posts, financial transactions, they formed a story darker than anyone could have imagined. The realization that Tahlia's life had been extinguished not by chance, but by design, sent ripples of horror through those who knew her. Yet the narrative was far from simple. Darnell's demeanor and behavior after the murder suggested confusion, regret, and something almost human in his struggle to reconcile his actions. Friends who had known him since childhood could not fathom the man behind the violence. He was charming, intelligent, and seemingly devoted. And now, behind closed doors, he had become the agent of destruction in Tahlia's world. Every new piece of evidence became an emotional hammer. Letters, photos, fragments of conversations. They painted a portrait of a love story turned toxic, of trust shattered in the most permanent way imaginable. Friends sobbed in interviews, recounting moments of joy, laughter, and ordinary life now forever tarnished by grief. Family members clung to each other, weeping at the thought that a daughter, a sister, a friend, could be lost so violently, so completely. Even the investigators felt it. The weight of human fragility pressed on them as they reconstructed Darnell's actions. Each step, each calculated move, was a reminder of the unpredictable darkness that can exist in the lives of those we hold closest. The room where Tahlia had fallen silent now held layers of emotion, fear, disbelief, anger, and unbearable sorrow. But the most gut-wrenching twist emerged from Talia's own digital presence. Her final Facebook Live, the moment she said yes, her eyes sparkling with hope and love, became a haunting testament. That simple, joyful moment was now forever juxtaposed against her final screams, frozen in the minds of everyone who witnessed it later through recordings, news reports, and family recollections. The contrast was devastating, a brutal reminder of how swiftly life can be stolen. Every revelation drew the audience further into the emotional labyrinth. The story became not just about crime, but about love, betrayal, trust, and the shocking fragility of life. Each viewer could feel the heartbreak, the fear, the disbelief that radiated from friends, family, and investigators alike. In uncovering these secrets, the narrative took on a new depth. The crime was no longer an isolated act of violence. It was a cascade of hidden emotions, decisions, and human failures, intimate, painful, and unrelenting. Every layer peeled back revealed another wound, another question: could this have been prevented? Could love and trust have survived the cracks in a relationship none of us saw coming? The morning Darnell was arrested felt surreal to everyone who knew him. Detective Malik Johnson recalled the tension in the air, the quiet shock among Talia's friends and family. He remembered the way Darnell's eyes shifted, sometimes blank, sometimes frantic, as officers read him his rights. There was a moment when it almost seemed impossible to believe this was the man who had laughed, loved, and shared his life openly just days before. News of the arrest spread like wildfire. Social media erupted with disbelief and anger. People were haunted by the memory of Talia's last live stream, the joy, the hope, the promise of a future now extinguished. Friends gathered, clutching each other tightly, tears streaming down faces that could not comprehend how someone so full of life could be ripped from their world in such a sudden, violent way. The courtroom became a stage for grief and fury. Talia's mother, Latoya, her voice trembling, recounted the vibrant life her daughter had lived. She described Talia's dreams, her laughter, and the countless ways she brought light into the world. Her words carried the weight of unimaginable loss, echoing in the room, leaving every listener unable to turn away. Witnesses described Darnell in ways that made hearts ache. Friends spoke of his charming exterior, the way he had gained Talia's trust, the subtle shifts that only hindsight could reveal. Family members recounted moments that now seemed like warnings, fragments of behavior that went unnoticed until it was far too late. Each testimony added a layer of sorrow and disbelief, a slow unveiling of a man who had betrayed everything he promised. Evidence was presented with meticulous detail, every text, every transaction, every digital footprint dissected. The prosecution painted a picture of premeditation, of a crime not born from a fleeting moment of anger, but from calculated, deliberate choices. The audience could feel the tension rising as each exhibit was revealed, each piece of evidence a hammer driving home the enormity of what had happened. During the trial, emotional testimonies punctuated the proceedings. Talia's friends wept openly as they recalled her dreams, her laughter, her kindness. Family members clutched photographs, mourning the daughter, sister, and friend they would never hold again. Every moment in the courtroom became a shared experience of heartbreak, guilt, and disbelief. Darnell's defense attempted to explain his actions, but their words felt hollow against the backdrop of loss. The contrast between the life he once shared with Tahlia and the violence he committed only deepened the emotional impact. Spectators, journalists, and even jurors were drawn into the story's tension, feeling the moral weight of betrayal, the sting of trust broken, and the finality of life lost. In the jury's deliberation room, the atmosphere was heavy with reflection. They wrestled not only with legal responsibility but with human empathy. How could someone so full of promise become capable of such irreversible destruction? The trial became more than a legal proceeding, it was a profound examination of human fragility, love, and the devastating consequences when trust is shattered. Finally, the verdict arrived. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. When the words, "guilty," were pronounced, an audible gasp went through the room. Tears streamed down faces. Relief mingled with sorrow, but no verdict could bring Tahlia back. Justice, while served, could not erase the emotional devastation that hung over every person who loved her. Outside the courthouse, the community struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had occurred. Candlelight vigils were held, and in the flickering flames, people mourned not only a life lost but the betrayal of trust that left scars far deeper than the physical crime itself. The story had transcended the courtroom, reaching into the hearts of everyone who had felt the warmth of Tahlia's presence and the cold shock of her absence. Through the trial, viewers are taken on an emotional journey that confronts the darkest realities of human relationships, the fragility of trust, and the irrevocable consequences of actions driven by selfishness and deceit. It is a harrowing, unforgettable reminder of how swiftly life can change and how deeply love and loss intertwine. The days after the trial felt like a blur to everyone who loved Tahlia. Her family woke up to empty spaces, echoes of laughter that would never return. Latoya, her mother, wandered the house where her daughter had once dreamed and laughed, clutching a blanket that still smelled faintly of Tahlia. Every corner held a memory, her favorite coffee mug, the half-finished journal, the photos of moments that now felt unbearably distant. As you leave this story behind, ask yourself, what can you do today to protect those you love? How will you ensure that another Tahlia does not fall victim to betrayal, obsession, or violence? Let her life, her laughter, and her spirit guide your actions. Let her story ignite courage, awareness, and action in your own community. Tahlia's memory demands more than mourning. It demands change. It demands vigilance. It demands that we see the world, and each other, with eyes wide open, hearts fully present, and hands ready to protect and care. Her story is tragic. Her loss is profound. But her legacy can live through every person willing to act, to speak, and to love fiercely. Cherish those you love. Watch for the signs. Stand up for what is right. Do not wait for tragedy to teach you the value of life. Tahlia's life was stolen in 3 days. Let her story remind us that every moment matters, every connection counts, and every life is irreplaceable. Take action. Protect the ones you love. Honor those who cannot speak for themselves. Make the world a place where love, vigilance, and humanity can prevail against the darkness.